Hello, I'm Andrew Hara, the host of the Bomb Squad. I wanted to tell you about my movies. All are available on Tubi, which is a free streaming service. The last one is a zombie drama about how a pandemic and isolation could drive a group of people mad. When the virus hits, John finds himself alone and scared until he meets Michael, his protector. But when Karina, another survivor, enters the mix, everything that John and Michael knew will be turned on its head. The last one is a zombie virus movie that's somehow even more relevant today. Plus, it has zombies. Check it out. Borderland is a mexploitation film about living in El Paso. When Sarah finds herself in debt to the cartels, she has until sunrise to find some missing monies with the help of her executioner. Borderland is a true midnight movie and a lot of fun. Finally, the documentary Humble Spirits tells the story of the Hahn family, including champion Jennifer Hahn from El Paso, Texas. The entire Hahn family has grown up in the combat sports and has helped shape who they are both in and out of the ring. Humble Spirits, a family of fighters, is the perfect documentary for boxing fans of all ages. Check out Tubi to watch all my films. Finally, The Empty Space, winner of multiple awards, including the Sacramento Horror Film Festival's Best of the Fest, is a cosmic horror about Amy Andrews, who's dealing with anxiety and depression after a violent attack that killed her husband. As she tries to find herself, she starts to lose her grasp on reality. Or could it be something much more sinister? The Empty Space is full of twists and turns, with Grace DeWilder of Rue Morgue magazine calling it a powerful film full of excellent performances by practically every cast member. All of Andrew Hada's movies are available to rent or buy on streaming services such as Tubi, Amazon, and many other places. We hope that you help support us by watching these films. Now, let's start the Bomb Squad. What's up, guys? Welcome to the Bomb Squad. Thank you. Welcome to the Bomb Squad, guys. We got a special episode. It's not really a special episode, but we are covering one of the most famous bombs of all time. It might have been also critically panned. I don't remember. I know that the critics weren't super kind with it, but I feel like they were nicer than I'll probably be. But anyway, this episode. Oh, by the way, all the new subscribers, thank you guys. Thank you guys for watching our deep dives into Opera review. This is nothing like it, so good for me. Today we're talking about 2016's Warcraft, directed by Duncan Jones, written by Duncan Jones, starring Travis Fimmel, Paula Patton, Ben Foster, boring ass names if you ask me, Toby Cabell, and others, and a lot of other British people. And you know what? Usually I ask one of my co-hosts to summarize it, but I'm going to summarize it this one and also tell you my biggest problem with this movie. So Warcraft is about a wizard opens a portal and they have to close the portal. That doesn't get said for about 2 hours into the movie. And that's gonna be that's gonna be my biggest problem with this movie. Yeah,
problem.
like okay, I don't know how you guys felt, but like the first almost what felt like 20 minutes is all just set up for stuff that's not gonna really matter. Like they're setting up the world, they're setting up these different portals, and it's like, okay, guys, but have you like I remember the Game of Thrones season 1. It's like if you watch season 1, it's very medieval, but there's not a lot of like magic. It's like kind of magic that you can believe.
Right.
It's not until the end where they bring out the dragons, and then in season 2 you have the baby dragons. They're adding a little bit more magic, etc., etc. And they do that because it's even like Avatar does it perfectly. Where Avatar, like in the first time we see the Na'vi, they kind of act very alien. And so we can kind of jump in that world. But when we jump into the world of Avatar, we start off by seeing spaceships, we see people. So we're like seeing stuff that we're at least familiar with. And then when we see the Na'vi, even the first time, they're very animalistic. We don't understand their language. So again, we're used to seeing animals like that. So when they start talking, then we're kind of already in that world. This movie does the opposite, where it has a very simple story, and so it throws everything at you in the first 30 minutes, and it's like, okay, but I don't even know who the main character is. What's the point of this? Like, why do I
Yeah,
care? You know?
yeah, the opposite of easing you into it is the first like 15 minutes of this movie is like this orc with his pregnant orc wife not wanting to like give it up to an evil orc necromancer, and I'm like, I'm sorry, what's happening? I is
And,
this
Right.
and then like the baby orc dies, and then the guy sees a deer who's just staring at it. She takes the
Yeah.
soul of the deer and puts it in the baby, and the baby comes alive. And I was like, wait, does that happen every time, or like now
yeah,
does the
this,
baby have
Right.
deer powers? Like what is
Exactly. Is it a
yeah,
corrupted baby now?
but it
Which
doesn't
is fine. It
does
was
not matter whatsoever. Yeah,
right. Like there's no reason to care for anybody at all. Like
yeah,
at any point in time in this movie. Like it's kind of like I don't even know the story that well of
right.
Warcraft, but it's like this movie expects you to like know a whole bunch of shit going in
yeah,
and to care about it. But it's just like I don't know. Like it's building the world, but what it's really doing is just like showing us the
Yeah.
world that
This
exists already. Like you were saying, like there's no way for us. Like there's no entry point.
this movie,
at all.
that's the perfect way it works. Like this movie does not feel like an entry point into the world of Warcraft. It feels like your friend who's or your coworker who's way too into Warcraft telling you about
Yes.
Warcraft and you can't escape. You know?
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that's
'cause-
exactly how it felt. It's like the longest
Yeah.
cutscene ever. Like the longest.
He's like, and then Galgamish, he gets the deer, you know, he gets the powers, gives it to the babies, and you're like, bro, I'm just trying to eat my bologna sandwich.
Yeah.
well, okay, and like
For sure, dude.
to
for sure.
contrast this, like this, because we actually talk about this movie on our top 10 of last year, I think. Dungeons and Dragons, I think, was on
Yeah.
where you're like, oh, you could do this right, because I know that Dungeons and Dragons probably has a lot of really complicated like lore and backstory,
Yeah.
but the movie is just like,
Right.
hey, there's magic people. Don't worry about it, though. It's like a heist. Whereas this movie's like, no, we're
Right.
going to explain the magic to you. Don't worry.
Yeah.
You're going to learn.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't,
Bunch of
but
fucking
like you
shit.
have, like obviously in that movie, like Chris Pine's like the, you know, kind of entry point, like the guy you're following. In this, they kind of have that, like the young wizard guy who kind of sucks, who's like talking
Yeah.
to Ben Foster, and you're like, oh, he should be like the point of view character to kind of like
Well,
he's learning about this, but he's
Let
not
me-
really in it enough.
let me
I
add
don't know.
something. This movie
Right.
might have the worst casting of all time. Like
Well.
for the old ass wizard, they put Ben Foster, and I love Ben Foster. You need an old person like that. Should have been Ian McKellen
I know,
or
dude.
or like Patrick Stewart, like some old
Yeah.
British dude. Why is it Ben Foster? He's so handsome. And then the
I
main
know.
guy, Travis Finnell, who plays like the main human. He's like the brother of the king.
Like the
Yeah.
brother-in-law.
Up until maybe the last 25 minutes, I thought he was a secret bad guy. He plays it so
I
unlikable
don't-
Oh,
yeah,
that like there's a point where like, okay, this isn't really a spoiler, but very quickly the young wizard that Josh is talking about figures out that the older wizard, played by a very young Ben Foster, is evil. And he goes and tells this guy, the main character, he's like, hey man, this guy's like messing around with magic. He's probably evil. Like, there's no other way to read this. And then the prince is like, no way. If he's doing anything evil, it's only to help us. So don't even think about it. Don't even bring it up. And then it like
he's a
don't
guardian.
even
It's-
look into this.
it zooms and then it zooms into the guy's face, and he's like looking at the camera like this. But and then he's and then he's the good guy. And I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
wait, what?
I know he has the craziest eyes. He does that like every battle he's in.
Yeah.
yeah,
he's
there's like
like this like 1,000
like
yards
a pu-
stare, but he's like not like a
Yeah.
uh,
he's like
there's a part near the end where he's like in prison and he's trying to get out, and I legit was like, wait, is he getting out to like kill a bunch of people or to save the day? I honestly didn't
Yeah.
know. Like,
And like, don't cast someone who looks like they're trying to kill Batman to be your like heroic knight. Unless like that's part of his story, but he's supposed to be kind of like Rob Stark or Stark in any of the Starks. Sorry guys, you're really gonna have to watch Game of Thrones to understand this episode. I didn't understand.
yeah. Thankfully, everyone in the world has. No one saw Warcraft, so it's
And then the other main character is played by Paula Patton, who plays like so there's like three main characters. It's the Prince guy, it's Paula Patton who plays a female org, and then it's Toby Cabell, who we're gonna talk about, don't worry, who plays like the male org guy. And the male org and every other male org looks like a giant monster, like how you think orcs look. Most female orgs look kind of similar, but they're females. Paula Patton just looks like she's beautiful, and it just looks like they gave her like
They
some
just gave her
Yeah.
green
tusks.
blemish. And like,
Yeah,
She
Little
looks-
tusks. Yeah, I thought she was like half human.
I
half
thought
orc,
so
I thought you
too,
were
but
gonna-
I don't
but
know if they
missed
say
at
that.
some point.
I think
yeah.
she is, but I also think like, okay, but why is she wearing a fur bikini and like, why is her
Well,
hair?
And,
It has,
and I will say,
Skyrim,
like, but
armor.
one of the biggest issues with this, because obviously
She's got a
plotting
blowout.
structure,
Is all I'm gonna say.
most of the orcs. I've never played Warcraft, the game, or whatever. Most of the orcs.
That's the
look
biggest
like,
twist we've ever. I mean, look at Josh.
I
I thought
know,
he was
right?
playing Warcraft right now.
Yeah,
I've played every fantasy garbage, but I've somehow like missed Warcraft. But no, like if you've seen if you've even seen like any of it, they kind of have that like the kind of Pixar proportions where it's like, oh, they're kind of like big with like the big heads,
Totally.
and they kind of have that in this movie, but the humans are just humans, so it's almost like
Yeah.
Pixar
silly.
monsters with real humans, and it's like it's this weird uncanny valley. Also, the main orc has human colored skin, and that's really off-putting to me.
I have a note that says
Yeah.
never have human colored skin on orcs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
'cause-
and something to go off of the Pixar proportions too, and the human skins and everything, is like they don't play any like this movie. It looks like a cartoon, and it feels like a cartoon. Like it feels very like YA, kind of like Disney Channel.
Yeah.
But like there's no
Yeah.
humor in it at all.
Yes.
Like, they don't understand that they're playing. They're making
One
it
of my
silly.
biggest
Like it's like Dungeons and Dragons works.
Yeah, one of my biggest notes is it's crazy how serious this movie is. Like, there's even like parts where like they could add humor. Like, there's parts where the orcs meet the humans for the first time. There's parts where the orc and the girl might fall in love. So you have a lot of meet cute moments, and there's just no jokes at all. Like, it's crazy. It's like not even. I mean, I know we all shit on Marvel, but I would rather have Marvel like goofiness than like
quips.
watching
Yeah.
watching a giant
Right.
8-foot org like hit a hammer to notify the other orgs, and I'm supposed to be like taking this as serious as Oppenheimer. It's a very weird feeling.
No.
But it's like, and you can almost tell that they're like, oh, this is gonna be like our like epic Game of Thrones, but it's like Game of Thrones has a bunch of
Right.
jokes in it.
Yeah.
Like people will like be like
Right,
mean
it's
to
fun.
each other
It's fun
and,
to
and kind of like undercut each other. In this, everyone's like reading the Wikipedia article about
Right.
orcs at each other.
And
It's,
I think
Yeah.
like I think that I also have this problem kind of with a lot of the new Star Wars shows, even some of the new Marvel shows when they try to course correct. Where now that they're trying to course correct, they're trying to be like, look, we're serious. Like, and I haven't seen Andor, but I know the Acolyte does this, where they're like, it's the Acolyte, so there's no more humor. It's just serious. Like people are gonna die, and it's like, yeah, but like, have you seen these other movies called Star Wars? Because they mix humor with like stakes very well. And I could watch it when I was 5 years old, and I can watch it when I'm 35, and I don't have a problem either way. Where it's like, I'm not gonna show my niece Andor and be like, yeah, this is how this is that prisoner is gonna die or whatever. And it's the same thing with this. Like,
Yeah.
if I was a kid, maybe like this is maybe almost tailor made for a 12-year-old to watch and find, because it's like this is a movie where you're barely kind of getting into more serious movies, and you see this and it becomes your favorite until you realize that movies can be better. Like,
yeah.
Right. It's like there's actually Lord
Yeah.
of the Rings, the entire trilogy. It's
and
just-
then
I'll
yeah.
get into that later.
once you pop that Lord of the Rings, it's over for Warcraft.
That's why, like, even a lot, because I was like kind of looking at this, I was like, all right, like, how do people feel? Because as not a fan of the games, and even the positive reviews are very like, oh, I'm a huge fan, so I liked it, but I do not see how anyone who's not a fan would understand like most of this. So that's like, that's not good, guys. Like, you shouldn't have to be a fan of Batman to see a Batman movie. You
And,
should get
yeah.
the information.
See,
you
and
know?
I do want to see what you guys think of this, because I do like I hear that that complaint a lot where it's like, oh, well, if you're into the games, you should know this, or like this isn't a good adaptation. But it's like, I to me sometimes it doesn't need to be a good adaptation. Like if it's a good enough movie, I think the adaptation can kind of take a hit. But it also becomes that thing where why are you remaking Warcraft if you don't want to adapt it, right? I see that too. But I don't know. It's like knowing nothing about Warcraft, that didn't affect me at all because I don't care what Warcraft is like. But I still like if this is what Warcraft is like. What are you guys doing? Like,
Yeah,
it's
but
boring
like,
as shit.
but like you have to imagine like,
Yeah.
well, and I don't know because there's two Warcrafts, right? There's the online one, and then there's the original, which was like a real time strategy game. So it's like you didn't need a strong story to be like, oh, I'm gonna move my 50 orc units up to like hit this tower because you're just looking at a map. So it's like
It's just
the
about
story is
battle.
just
Yeah.
it's a thing you read between like maps. So it didn't really matter if it was like great, you know.
Right.
So I almost feel like
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not like The Last of Us or something where you're like, oh, this is clearly like a video game trying to be a movie. This is more like, why are you trying to make a Tetris movie? You know?
Yeah.
Oh,
Why?
they did make a Tetris
Yeah.
It's
movie. Yeah,
it's
never
not just
mind.
like why are you trying to make it why are you trying to make a Tetris movie, but why are you bringing in all the lore? You know, like I don't need Dr. Mario to show up in the Tetris movie. Like you can just make a good
A
thing.
square is a square.
It's kind of like
Yeah.
Yeah.
a good example is the Mario Brothers movie where it's like they use a lot of the stuff from the games and there's even like but they also know when to kind of pull back like you know you can see Donkey Kong because Donkey Kong makes sense in that world but then you see like something alluding that the dog from Duck Hunt exists but they don't really like show it because like that just wouldn't make sense in the story they're telling where this movie kind of feels like
Funny little nod.
yeah, this movie kind of feels like I don't give a shit if it doesn't make sense. We're putting in the battle that old orcs fight against each other to be king. Like, okay, man, it's not gonna really even affect the story. Maybe don't put it in there. You know.
Well,
Oh, go
Yeah.
ahead, William.
well just about the dog and like what you're saying, it's like if you have the duck hunt dog and you kind of nod to it, that's like fun because it doesn't really matter to the plot. But it's like the movie starts off when you see the human, he's getting a gun from a dwarf, and the dwarf's like, "Here's a boomstick." And you're like, "Okay, there's dwarves in this world." And then at some point they have a big meeting with elves and dwarves and humans, and the elves and dwarves are like, "No, we're not going to fucking help you. This is a dumb battle."
Yeah.
But you're like, "Well, of course they're going to come back because you've now introduced dwarves and elves." And then like I was like paying attention to the movie, but it's like hard to. It's
You do
incomprehensible.
check out
But
after a while, but yeah.
yeah, it's like in the last battle, I was like looking for elves and like dwarves. I was like, okay, so where's everyone else? And they just never come.
Yeah.
Like they literally are introduced,
Yeah, which
and
I'm
they're
sure
like, "Oh, we're not gonna
happened
help," and they don't
in.
help.
Yeah, that probably happened in the lore. So like, no, we have to include
Right?
this, and it's like, well, no,
And
just
Yeah,
don't do
it's
it.
also
they're good
like
characters.
there's like okay, so Toby Cavell plays this kind of this orc who got stuck on the human side. He has his own little tribe. And the whole movie's about him, like how he realizes that whatever the orcs are doing is they're working for an evil guy secretly who's a wizard. Yes, this is that complicated. And so he's like, well, let me go against my own orcs so I can save the orcs to team up with the humans. And then the humans don't want to team up with
Yeah,
me. And then he's like, oh, because I need to save my tribe. The tribe gets killed in a blink and you'll miss moment. And so everything that Toby Cabal does has no bearing on the entire plot, other than kind of like rallying the troops in a kind of stupid way. And it's like,
yeah,
why? Like this isn't even like, oh, this the story choices you took were weird. It's like that's not even how you tell a story.
right. I didn't even really catch there were
Yeah,
two. I knew that there were two tribes of orcs, but I missed when that was explained. And so I didn't know why they were fighting each other. I was just like,
Right.
there's some tensions here. Some are green, some are brownish. Like
Yeah.
it was just so, I don't know, totally confusing.
yeah, and I mean, it's also kind of like one. It's like the first thing you see is this super evil orc necromancer being like, "I'm doing this for my people." It's like, well, obviously they're gonna have to overthrow this guy. And then you see like evil wizard Ben Foster being like, "I'm doing evil magic for my people," or like, obviously they're gonna have to get this guy, and that's what happens. So it's like it still
Right.
gets there,
Well, and I think like
you know.
it's that thing where I think that they had two choices. they could have either told a very simple, kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, a very simple story about a small group of people where you're
Yeah.
kind of like introducing people to the world, and then you're like, here's this, like check this out. Or they could have gone Avatar balls to the walls, where they really showed you everything, like it's epic battles and stuff. But this movie tries to do both, and so it
Yeah.
doesn't really work. Especially like the CG, like the orcs look really good when they're in Earth, and like you can see them against the real background because you're like, hell yeah, this looks awesome. Once they
Yeah.
get into the orc world, and the orc world looks not that good, and then when you see an orc in front of it, they're both like hurting each other in a way where they're making it obvious that the other one is fake, and it makes the whole
Yeah.
thing look shitty.
Right.
And
Especially the portals.
Yeah.
The portals look
yeah,
insane. It was so cartoon.
and then there's like a part at the beginning where like the big orc, and like, okay, the orcs are like 10 feet tall. They're all muscle. They're gigantic. You'll see one in the cover photo probably. Oh no, it might be Paula Patton. Gotta get those boys. But they're like, there's a scene like they ride these big timber wolves as horses, and then there's this scene where like the Toby Cabell jumps on a horse and he takes off, and I'm like, I wanted that horse to just like go poop.
Yeah. Flatten the fuck out.
Or at least walk or something, but
Mhm.
it's just running at full speed, and I'm like,
It's
but
doing
this
great.
orc, even if it was the skinniest orc ever, should weigh 300 pounds, and the horse
Yeah.
can't handle that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very. And they also kind of do it, and this isn't even necessarily just to dig at this, because like every Marvel movie's filmed this way now. The kind of like, oh, this is all so obviously green screen that it all just kind of has that like Verizon commercial lighting, where you're like,
Yeah,
yeah, you're on a sound stage, you have neutral lighting, and then there's just like green glowing stuff behind
and
you, and that's kind of half this movie.
I'll tell
Yeah.
you, like, if this movie had been about Toby Cabell's team, they get stuck on Earth. Maybe like they're trying to find a portal home. They find an evil wizard. They fight him, and then them and the humans get stuck in the other side. So like, kind of setting up the story of Warcraft as I think I know it. I don't really know what it's about, but like that would have worked really well because like like I said, they look good in human environments. It would have been a simpler story.
Mhm.
But we're like, there's sometimes where I'm like, I don't even know if we're on Earth or wherever the orcs are from. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, sometimes it feels like
It's
Toby
all-
Cabell. Yeah.
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 It was insane.
And
I
it's
was
like,
gonna-
it's. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna. If you had more of a point, mine's kind of switch off.
Go.
It was a fucked up movie, but I do want to shout out to Duncan Jones. That I do think that he does know how to get emotion from a scene, because even though it was like totally incomprehensible, like there were moments in the movie where like somebody was dying, or like, something dramatic was happening, and like I did feel bad for the characters, even though I didn't like know
Mhm.
anything about them, and I was like, this
Yeah.
Duncan Jones knows how to craft some drama, and he knows how to craft an individual scene, but altogether this movie was just complete trash.
Yeah.
It's like,
I would
there was
almost
some
say,
talent
like,
there, which was frustrating.
yeah,
Something good
there's
there.
like you talk about like kind of emotion. There is a scene near the end where the girl orc, who's kind of been like captured by humans but like has kind of come around,
Mhm.
is like essentially, I mean, spoilers, I guess. I don't know the names of any characters, but she's like oh, the orcs are advancing, so the king's like, you have to kill me, because if you kill me, like you'll regain like honor, and then like you can like broker peace. I'm like, oh, this is kind of like a really good climactic scene for your movie.
Yeah.
But I don't even like know if these two characters have had like two conversations.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like,
They
this
just
is a
met.
good scene you didn't set up, but I
Yeah.
could see how if we'd
Yeah,
been
yeah.
following her and the king, you know.
So, and there's like that scene. So, spoilers. I mean, we're just going spoilers, guys. There's not a lot to talk about. It's
It
not
doesn't
great.
matter, yeah.
So like, okay, so apparently, and I'm gonna talk about my favorite scene in the whole movie. Apparently, like, there's this ritual where two orcs can fight and get like, kind of like Game of Thrones. I'm not gonna reference Game
Yeah.
of Thrones anymore, guys. Where they can fight and see who's king. And so like,
a duel, literally.
Toby Cabell's character is like, oh, I want to challenge evil wizard guy, and it leads to my favorite scene where the evil wizard, who kind of like, he looks like how you think, he's like, I'm gonna kill you, and he's got like a cane. He takes off his jacket. He's so jacked for no real reason. And then my note for that scene was like, wait, they just gonna fight? Like, why even make him a wizard if the whole ending relies on physical strength? So
Yeah.
then he kills Toby Cabell's character, and he like because he cheats, he takes his powers from
Yeah.
him,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, how's he gonna get out of this one? And he just dies, and you're like, oh, okay, that's the main character, that's fine. And so then like they're like, oh, that goes against our culture, that goes against our way of life, like you're garbage, and then they still just fight for him anyway. And like he kills
Right.
Toby Cabell's whole tribe. He's like, because they're the whole his tribe is like, oh, we're not gonna participate with this guy. He's so evil, and he's kind of like there's that scene where it's supposed to be them showing the other orcs, like, look at how evil this guy was. And
Hmm.
then so they're like, let's get out of here, guys. And then they all walk around like they're a 1950s biker gang. And then the wizard's like, okay, and he just kills them too. And he's like, anyone else? And it's like, okay, like that. This scene should have been at the beginning to establish he's evil. It shouldn't be at the end with the main character where nothing like that guy's whole thing was trying to save his tribe, and you just killed them in
Yeah.
like in a 2 second clip. Like, what the hell are you
Right.
guys
Yeah,
doing?
it's because they do spend a lot of time with them before. I mean, the whole first 20 minutes of the movie is just about his tribe and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
And
Yeah.
again, like I did like the idea of, the guy like finally using too much of his power in front of everyone to show like, oh, this guy never cared about any of us. He just wants power. And
Right.
so as soon as he was challenged, he was willing to cheat. If that's how that story had gone, because like if the orcs had turned against him and then he
Mhm.
used some evil orcs to fight him, like that would have worked, but it doesn't really matter for the battle that's gonna come.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything's just kind of a disconnected series of events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because even the I don't know, like the stuff for like the young wizards trying to stop Ben Foster, it's kind of like that's just kind of happening on its own. It's everything's just kind of happening
Yeah.
parallel to everything
It's
else.
it's kind of like if you watch Return of the Jedi, a new movie. In the Return of the Jedi, like Han Solo has to blow up the shield so that uh, the ships can go through the shield force, get into the Death Star, blow up the Death Star, and then Luke is just kind of doing something that's unrelated to anyone. He's just
Yeah.
kind of distracting other people for no real reason.
Right.
But like in this one, so like you need Han Solo to succeed for Lando to succeed, and then Lando needs to succeed so Luke can succeed, and then the Emperor is kind of trying to stop all of these things. In this one, it's like it would be like Han Solo is trying to turn off the shield, Lando is also trying to turn off the shield, and Luke is also trying to turn off the shield in all different areas, And it's like,
Right.
but okay, but if you guys fail, it's okay because we got like 3 other chances, and so it's like and it's weird because I love Moon. Source
Yeah.
Code is okay, and it's like
Yeah.
those movies have really good stakes. And this one is just kind of like I think what ended up happening was maybe because I know that in some interviews Duncan Jones was talking about how the original take was very black and white, like the orcs were the bad guys, humans were the good guys, and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And so he wanted to make it more complicated, but it's like, okay, but if you're gonna do that, the world we're introduced to has to not be as complicated as your plot.
Right.
Like
Or
one
even
of them
just
can be
fiction.
complicated. Yeah, a TV show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On a TV show on HBO about dragons, maybe.
Yeah.
Um,
Get Sean Bean involved.
yeah. Not for too long though.
Yeah. Yeah. Just for the
Um,
first season. I mean, no, don't listen to that if you haven't seen it.
yeah, no spoiler. Anyone who's watched Game of Thrones is just gonna be like, "What the fuck, guys? You guys are just spoiling it." Um, that's what happens when you gotta talk about Warcraft. I will say, the music rocked. The music was very good, and I feel like
That's
I've
all right,
heard
yeah.
I heard that music. I feel like I've heard that music in other trailers.
Oh, really?
That's the real sign of a good score when you hear
Yeah.
it other
Yeah.
places.
Hell yeah.
But it was great. I mean, that's the thing is that you could tell, especially you could tell really Duncan Jones loves the World of Warcraft. No pun
Yeah.
intended. Um, it's just that like you didn't explain to me why I should love it.
Yeah.
really the
That's a
big
good
one.
Yeah. It's very much like a very big budget fan movie. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
every time you see comic book fans being like, here's the perfect Superman casting, and it's a wrestler because it's a buff guy. It almost feels like that, like, oh, a fan got to make the movie this time.
Yeah.
Right.
Wait until you ask them to fan cast He-Man because it's literally whoever bodybuilder they can find at the time with blonde hair. And I think like
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like again, obviously The Dark Knight is based on the comic book The Long Halloween, amongst a bunch of different comic books. But Christopher Nolan took that comic book and kind of put it into the world he was creating.
Right.
And that's why that movie works so well. Like, you can use these things as basis, but you also have to like be aware of the story you're telling. And I think
Yeah.
that Duncan Jones wasn't as aware of that, and it might not have been his fault. Because to me, it seems like I know that Yul Boyle, like, there's a funny anecdote where Yul Boyle tried to get the rights to this, and Blizzard was like, no, and especially no to you. Like,
Yeah, I saw that too.
and so it's like you can tell. I kind of feel like they did this a little bit with Mario, because I know for a long time there was a lot of companies that wanted the rights to Mario, and for a long time Mario was like, no, we don't want anyone to kind of sully this story
Yeah.
for us. And so I think that's kind of what happened here, where maybe like Blizzard was just too protective of the brand, and they were like, "You can't have that. You'll need it. You'll need this," or blah blah blah.
You have to put this guy
Yeah,
in
you
because this is a
can't.
huge fan
Right.
favorite.
Like,
Yeah.
if you don't introduce the orcs or the hobbits or whatever they're called, the hobbits and the elves, well, they're gonna be confused in the sequel, and it's
Yeah.
like, okay, but they're confused now.
Yeah, it's like it's funny. It's funny to say like because Christopher Nolan like putting a lot of the Long Halloween in it. This would be if like the studio's like, no, you need a 15-minute CGI Solomon Grundy scene in Batman,
Yeah,
where it's like
exactly.
that doesn't really work for my Dark Knight movies. Like I don't care, put it in.
This is like someone forced Sam Raimi to put Venom in a Spider-Man, and he did it begrudgingly.
Well, that movie's still better than this movie, but yes, it's same vibes.
Yeah, I mean, and I really went in because it was that thing where, and it's kind of gotten a little bit of a resurgence of people being like, this movie wasn't as bad as you said. And it's like, I kind of agree that it's not terrible. It's just a lot of nothing. Like, there's just
Which
nothing.
movie?
There's no one, Warcraft.
Oh.
There's just nothing. There's no one to root for. Like, everyone's
Oh.
kind of a jerk. Like, even like Paula Patton's probably the nicest person, but even then she has no personality other than being really tall and really hot.
Yeah.
And then it's funny because everyone's like, no one will ever want you. You look like a monster. And it's like, she looks like the hottest woman I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Like, if I was Robin Thicke, I also would have created the worst album to try to win her back. But it's just like, I don't know.
I forgot about that. What was Paula
It's
Patton's
just-
like breakout movie?
It was that Mission Impossible where she's
Oh.
wearing the green dress. Yes, I know exactly what dress she was wearing. Because it was a breakout role. She's also in another great movie called Deja Vu.
That was okay.
But like, there's no one to root for. There's nothing like to hold you. There's not even any like jokes other than unintentional ones about buff wizards. And so like, even like some of like at the end, Ben Foster brings out this kind of demon thing, or he turns into it. It's kind of unclear. And it's like a big monster that's made of rock, but it looks like it's made of gingerbread. Yeah.
Made of clay.
Yeah, it's made of clay. And it's like, okay, guys, for your big finale, it's a big formless clay monster. Like, you couldn't think of anything else, like there's literally griffins and there's like molten guys. It's like something.
It's just you almost like because they ride cool griffins. The orcs like. It's like, why doesn't he have like a relationship with his wolf companion?
Right.
It's such an easy layup to have like, oh, he loves his dog. He's relatable, but maybe it was just too much CGI to do the dog
like
in the
petting
scene.
him.
Too much.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah,
and then,
it's
like the young wizard guy goes into a fucking crazy ass black rock and like talks to like some like old god, and it was kind of like you're like waiting for him to like have like they're trying to like show that he's getting more powerful the whole movie. And like they might have shown this, and I just wasn't paying attention. But it's like, where was his big moment where he like does he kill Ben Foster? Like is he the one that destroys him?
He has that part where he like kind of freezes the rock monster. That's like the most power he uses, but he doesn't even stop the rock monster, so it doesn't feel that triumphant.
Right.
Like it should have
badass wizard at the end of this movie.
Yeah, it should have been like him like summoning all the power and then like turning things off or on, or I don't know. Something, but it was just kind of like him being like, here's a flashing light.
Right, we knocked all the trees.
That
Do you
that's
remember
just
Yeah.
that
it's so weird because it's so clearly like again, like going back to like Dungeons and Dragons, where it's like, oh, everyone's like Chris Pine's like a loser, and the whole team hates him, but in the end, it's his plan that works.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
this movie, it's like, yeah, the wizard does suck. He doesn't really help.
Yeah.
It's like
And it would have
they,
been
they
like,
were right.
you know what would have been perfect is to set this up almost in like a Guardians of the Galaxy way, where it's like, oh, this guy, he got stuck on the Earth side. This girl's half human, so they rejected her. This is the prince who should have been king, so
And the
he's
misfits.
and now this group has to
Yeah.
go on a adventure. And like, oh, this wizard doesn't know that much, you know? And it's like, yeah, they have the team archetypes there, but it's like, hey guys, I know in World of Warcraft you play the character, but in real life you have to put personality on these characters, or else
Right.
we're gonna get bored.
Yeah, and don't have them be
Yeah.
like with like separate them from the big groups. Like the big groups is what
Mhm.
makes it confusing for sure. Like,
Yeah.
they're all involved in these big armies, and it's like separate those motherfuckers.
And that would have been perfect because they could have had a scene like maybe they're at the campfire at night, and he's like, "Oh yeah, my prince," and he could have explained how the humans do
Yeah.
things. Then he could have been like, "Oh well, in my land we do this," and
Yeah.
then even you could have had the human wizard and the evil wizard team up at the end, but it's like at the end there's just so much garbage happening on screen, and also like, why do the knights have guns? Like, I know that's probably from the game, but it just looks ridiculous because like,
I know.
if you have guns, then why do you have sheet armor and knives? And stuff?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
they're
kind of
just
get it.
there
Of
to
like
be
they're
there.
just
Yeah,
yeah.
No one
it's
even
just
talks
like-
about how powerful they are or anything.
it's like they needed something that would kill the orcs pretty quickly, and they had already established it can't be swords.
It's also because
Yeah.
it is funny because like early on too, it's very like you see a bunch of humans fighting a bunch of orcs, and then this guy's like, "Oh, you can't. Orcs will always outwit you with brute strength, so you need to be clever."
Yeah.
And I don't see anyone do anything clever the rest of the movie.
They're-
They
yeah.
don't even have like a training session or anything.
They're-
It's just
they-
swing your sword.
They
Yeah.
tell you at the beginning like, oh, orcs, they move quickly, so you have to be clever, and literally every orc after that just runs straight for their enemy.
But
Yeah,
so
right.
do most humans too, you know.
Yeah, everyone does. They're just like everyone runs like this with their sword up, and it's like this is why
It's
you guys
like you're-
keep getting.
You're just playing an MMO and just running from encounter to encounter.
And
you
then
know?
like halfway through the movie, they introduce another orc who's like the second in command bad guy, and it's like, guys, there's just too much already. Like we're
I
not.
I
we're
was
not gonna
I
do
was
this.
done by that point. I was like, I don't even know the human names. I'm not going to learn more orcs.
And then like there is a good scene. So like at one point, one of the most to me effective scenes is like the prince's son is on the other side and they're trying to get to him, but he gets trapped. And so like the
Like the
prince is
lightning
trying to
cage.
get there. Yeah, and he's trying to like get over there, and he's like using the shield of the orcs to use their power against them, and he doesn't make it. That scene goes on for so long, but it's a good
Yeah.
scene. It's like
Good scene. I
this
like that.
movie had, yeah, this movie had. I think that's kind of what William was saying. Like Duncan Jones knows how to make a movie, so it's almost like, so what happened here? You know, like,
Right.
yeah,
Did they
maybe it's
want
just
him
the
to put all that stuff in
studio.
there?
Yeah,
This
and
Blizzard, like, the
it's-
story has to be this.
and I wonder if it's like because it's 2 hours, which is long, but it's pretty short for an epic fantasy movie. So I wonder if
Yeah.
he had this in mind for a 3 hour epic, and then they told him like,
Like,
no, it
chopped
has
it
to
down.
be 2. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's pretty accurate.
yeah.
'Cause,
It
it feels
also-
so bloated for such little explanation that it's like, how could Duncan Jones
it's
think this was good?
Yeah.
weirdly like bloated and rushed, where it's
Yeah.
just like you're just like jumping from scene to scene, and I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it totally ends on like the sequel teaser for the sequel that's never gonna happen. And a lot of like bad blockbusters do that these days. But yeah, it's like the baby orc is like found in the river.
Oh yes,
He-
I remember that.
They're
part.
like, he's gonna be important later. That it's like, well, I guess not. I'll
They-
never learn about
He has
this.
a
You know?
deer soul in his body. He's going to become
Yeah.
nature guy.
He'll
They-
unite them or something. Yeah.
One of my other notes was I don't think it's too much, but it's too something, which is like
Yeah.
it's
agree.
it's there. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. It's not the worst thing
Yeah.
ever. It's just like
Yeah.
it kind of feels like Assassin's Creed, where it's like this was clearly made by a committee, and there's no like
Mhm.
I think like this one gets a little bit more of a pass because it's clearly led by someone who's very passionate about the game, but it's just like almost too passionate. It's kind of like, and I think about this too when you talk about something like I talk about He-Man. It's like, does anyone even really know what characters I'm referring to? You know? Like,
Right.
if I tell you like, oh, and then Evil Lynn was fighting Man at Arms, or you're like, I don't know what that is, man.
Yeah.
Like you have to
Sounds
explain that.
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. Why are their names that? But so, and I think that's kind of what this is. And
Yeah.
so it's just kind of like,
Yeah.
again, if you're making a Warcraft movie, I shouldn't be able to use the He-Man movie against you as a good example. So yeah, I don't know, guys, but I would say check this out. And if you enjoyed this episode and you enjoyed our opera episode, I know you're going to enjoy our next series because it's not even close to anything like
I was
that.
gonna say
Um,
there's no theme here. That's
Yeah.
completely separate. I will say this movie is bad enough. It finally got me to watch Lady Hawk, and Lady Hawk quite good. So
I've never seen it.
check out Lady
Lady
Hawk on
Hop, an
Tubi.
Abby recommendation.
Got it.
Yeah,
Um,
Abby, when you don't watch this, I liked it.
Is
yeah.
that kind of like a heavy metal movie? Like
No, it's medieval.
No, it's super cheap fantasies, like the opposite of Warcraft. There's like they had no budgets; it's mostly in like meadows, but
It's kind of
good.
like
Rutger
Legend.
Hauer,
interesting.
Matthew
Okay.
Broderick, Michelle Pfeiffer at the height of her powers. Yeah,
Cool. The height of her powers is Scarface. I
Yeah.
can't even have a little baby with her. But yeah, guys, so we'll see you next week as we start a brand new series as we head up to a very important movie we're all excited for. So,
Lady Hawk.
Lady Hawk Part 2 on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
The eight series episodes. Watch it before they delete it. But yes, come back next week and we'll take you up. We'll take you up to find new terror on the